All right, gang. The press conference just ended. It ended about 10 minutes, a little over 10 minutes late, but I wanted to get to you. So, and again, take this with a grain of salt. I wrote notes on order the questions were asked. So you can see what was asked. Okay, and again, before we go into any discussion, before we could put up any theories or talking points and narratives, keep in mind they have not had their pro scouting meeting yet. Meaning, and Brian Cashman emphasizes multiple times, they haven't figured out what the roster is going to be yet, what it needs to be, what they need to address this offseason. So that hasn't happened yet. So, and Brian Cashman is not going to lay out his cards in a press conference to give people an idea of what he's searching for. Because those players that are represented by those agents, they're going to put a premium on their players. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So shout out to the chat, by the way. Okay. Now, let's Boone answered. He went first. Okay, and he was asked a bunch of questions too. So, one of the things he emphasized was timing, right? The timing didn't work, and this is something I talked about a lot too. The timing didn't work out at the end for the Yankees, right? They ran into a hot team. They got cold at the wrong time. They ran into a hot team, the Toronto Blue Jays, at the right time, right? Just like Toronto Blue Jays got their asses handed to them by the Mariners, but then they heated up last night. So this is playoff baseball. Hello, Jennifer, and shout out to everybody in here. And then, like I said, they ran into a hot team in ALDS. Okay, I'm looking down at my notes just so I can make sure I. And he also credited the Blue Jays for the stuff that they did this year, and it's stuff like this that can make or break a team's chances, right, in the postseason. You get cold, you get a couple guys get cold at the wrong time, or a couple guys get hot at the right time from the other team, or their hot players neutralize our hot players, right? That's playoff baseball. That's just the way that it is in sport. And for someone who's played a game, this is it rings true more often than not. Okay. And then the first questions he was asked was about Anthony Volpe. So Anthony Volpe had left shoulder labrum surgery. We know this already. Okay. And he's not going to start hitting for at least 4 months, but he is going to have a delayed start to the season. Okay. He will not be ready for opening day. But they did not say he was going to miss the entire season. Okay. I know some people saying I've talked to orthopedic. They don't know it. That isn't true. Okay. No orthopedic surgeon just going to say he's going to miss the whole season, especially one who didn't operate on the man. Okay. But one of the things that Aaron Boone emphasized, or Brian Cashman emphasized, that once they got into the surgery, and I'll get to this too, the repair was a little bit more extensive than the MRI showed. Okay. So it needed a little bit more. Okay. So. Oh, John. Dude. That's what happens. You be a dick, you get banned. It's that easy. Okay. I'm going over what happened in the press conference. I watched the whole entire thing. Okay. They credited Toronto for putting pressure on the Yankees pitchers, which they did. They have relentless at bats. They worked the counts. They foul pitches off, right? They got to our starters much sooner. Okay. And when they said emphasize, and one of the things they also pointed out was that throughout the season, they checked in multiple times with MRIs and trainers and everybody else, and there wasn't a heightened need for surgery at any point in time until the discussion started to become apparent towards later in the season. Once they had Caballero, once they had a guy that could play for Anthony Volpe, then it became a little bit more apparent. But the decision wasn't made for them to tie the doctors and then the trainers until at the end of the season to get surgery. So we can say, we wanted the surgery should have happened and so on and so forth. They listened to everybody, even Anthony Volpe himself. He said he was good. So now you can use his play as a telltale sign, but when they asked him if he's physically feeling good, that rings significant for a lot of players when it comes to the trainers, when it comes to the coaches and managers and so on. So just keep that in mind. But he will be behind. Okay, he's not going to throw. Not going to start hitting for at least 4 months. Okay. They also said they asked about Aaron Judge. His MRI showed improvement, and right now there's no surgery recommended at all for Aaron Judge. So that's a big encouraging sign for Aaron Judge. And they also credited he was throwing with a little bit more authority towards the end of the postseason as well. You could see that as well. So that's a good sign too. So also, additionally, Carlos Rodon had surgery. Okay. to remove loose bodies. Bone spurs like in his elbow. So he's not going to throw for 8 weeks. He will have a delayed start to the season too. A delayed start to the season. Okay. Hal's not going to clean house. As much as we like it to Mark, and all due respect to people, Hal's not cleaning house. Okay. Now, you mentioned other teams where they had opportunities too. The 2019 team against Houston. That was a beat up team, but 2024 World Series team last year, they had a good chance to win the World Series, but they got beat by the Dodgers. So, and Aaron Boone emphasized that 2025 became a more well-rounded team after the trade deadline. They got more athletic, more versatile, which they did. They did. So, and it's one of the things. They also emphasized Giancarlo Stanton because he was asked too. Right now, his test came out clean. His MRIs came out clean. Right. So, but again, they emphasize. But Aaron, I'm still talking about Aaron Boone. I have a couple pages on Aaron Boone before I get to Cashman. They didn't answer questions together. Boone had a half an hour, and then Cashman had a little more than a half an hour. So, Aaron Boone emphasized that they must execute better in October when it counts the most. Okay, and then they had no second guessing on playing Anthony Volpe, and there was no discussions or suggestions from the doctors or trainers on surgery until the end of the season. So they went with what was discussed to them by the doctors and the trainers and Anthony Volpe. Okay. Then he talked about Mike Harkey and Travis Chapman. It was an organizational call that was above Aaron Boone's pay grade. So, but they did emphasize they bring in Jake Hurst, who's been in player development. He's going to be coming in as one of his assistant hitting coaches. Now that could change because James Rosen, the hitting coach, is interviewing with the Minnesota Twins right now for the managerial job. So if Rosen leaves, Hurst might be bumped up or someone else might be brought in. But Hurst is joining the dugout now as an assistant hitting coach. So, and Aaron Boone also emphasized that, and at times he felt like he'd have been more creative or bold with regards to the bullpen usage during the season as well to get one more win, because one more win would have led to them winning the division. Now, that wasn't asked of him, and at no point in time did he use the injuries as an excuse for not winning more games. At no point in time did Aaron Boone use it. At no point in time did Brian Cashman use it. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. And if much people accuse me of making excuses for them, they didn't make excuses either. And I'm not making excuses either. I'm telling folks exactly what happened in the press conference. Okay? He said that Volpe will be in the mix to start at shortstop, but he didn't flat out guarantee that it was going to be the starting shortstop moving forward. So nobody mentioned George Lombard. Nobody mentioned anybody else. But he says he has improvements that he needs to make to become a frontline starting shortstop. And obviously, we all agree with that, right? So, and he also used Dansby Swanson as an example, as a guy who came. He was the number one pick in the draft, Dansby Swanson, but it took him more years to become a frontline shortstop. So, right? It's not another year down the tubes. But that was also brought to them as the Steinbrenner mandate and blah, blah, blah. We'll get to that too. It's not down the tubes. But people are entitled to their opinions on it. Aaron Boone did like what he saw from Jason Dominguez when he was asked about him as well. But he did not rule out him being moved either or traded. So it sounds as if they're keeping their eyes open for opportunities that could really, really benefit the team this offseason. So neither he or Brian Cashman committed to any of these guys being starters. None of them, not including Volpe. So he said he's in the mix for it, but that's all they didn't go beyond that. They did not go beyond that. So some telling things here. And he says he does see Jason Dominguez as a starter, and he's helped with the team's diversity this year. He likes his character and the way he carries himself and his abilities. So, and they do hope that he plays winter ball. He emphasized that as well. They hope he plays winter ball, and he sees him in left field, not center field. So at no point right now is Jason Dominguez in the mix for center field for the Yankees. Okay. Now the question went back to Volpe again. Volpe maintenance. How do they maintain Volpe? Right. Well, it's communication with the trainers and the doctors and the coaches regularly. A few aggravated. A couple times got aggravated this season, but they always checked in. Got MRIs. They got got 2 cortisone shots this year as well. So, but he's at some point he started to compensate with his play, and this is where it became a little bit off kilter, right? Especially with defensively with his throws and his footwork, fielding, and obviously his swinging. And again, when you're batting from the righty side, that left arm, that arm you swing that has the bat in it, that's the left arm. That's the shoulder where he got the surgery done. His left labrum. Okay, so he does he hopes surgery helps his all around performance at some point too. But again, they already know he's going to be delayed. So as of right now, he'll be delayed. Rodon will be delayed, and Cole will be delayed. But we already know about Cole, right? It sounds like they have a May timetable for Garrett Cole. So now, what else here? Yeah, Cole is doing well. He will start light off the mound next week. He's on track for May. So he'll be starting throwing off mound lightly next week. He's already started the throwing program. Small. Now they asked about Clark Schmidt too. Clark Schmidt is 14 weeks post-surgery right now. He said he's going to start throwing in mid-December. Just throwing, not off a mound, just throwing. His throwing program. And he's on track for, it sounds like, late part of the second half of the season is possible right now. So he's on track for that. Yes, Rodon had a procedure to clean up some loose parts in his elbow. So he's going to go 8 weeks without throwing, and he's going to start the season a little delayed too. So again, we do have Cabrera coming back, and Caballero is obviously going to get some playing time too. It sounds like they're going to do a competition at shortstop, but they didn't mention, they did not rule out the ability to bring in somebody in free agency either. They did not rule that out. So, and they're not going to commit to that stuff right now anyway. They're not going to rule out this stuff, especially before having organizational meetings. And obviously, they're not going to show their cards to give people leverage on them. So they're never going to do that. So folks that expect them to do that, it's not happening. Okay? No, it's not happening. And yeah, I mean, he responds to organizational criticism as a whole. And they have to dust themselves. They have to dust themselves off and move past what happened and what didn't happen this year. So they're already focused on 2026 and not looking back. So they'll take the lessons they learned and going to continue to move forward. People can, excuse me, fans and content creators will, excuse me, allergies. My God, relitigate the past. I have folks still coming to streams saying, well, why did he use Nestor Cortez? That's a year ago in the World Series. People still talking about that. Okay. We have quality coming in 2026, and that's not including the personnel stuff that they're going to address. And now Aaron Boone was also asked about Ben Rice. He sees him mostly at first base, but he could have some opportunities at catcher too. But he also said it depends on what happened with the roster. So that could change. Now, that's in line with what's being said right now, that people are calling the Yankees about Ben Rice in trade. Now, what if they trade him for a good pitcher? I don't know. What do they do? Maybe they bring in that Japanese guy at first base that I talked about recently. Okay, Omakami, one of these guys. I think he's a better fit than Murakami. Okay, I think he's going to be power and lots of strikeouts. And I think the other guy that I've talked about from Japan, a first base, third baseman, would be a more contact-oriented bat. He also bats from the righty side. Okay, that is contingent upon them if they happen to move Rice. But they do see him as a fixture here moving forward. But again, non-committal as always. Now, that was Aaron Boone. Now let's pivot to Brian Cashman. Okay, the first thing he asked was, that it was asked of him was the World Series mandate from George Steinbrenner. Okay, and um, is it they're evaluating everything that's happened. They're evaluating the season and so on. Okay, and describe the season. He made it clear that they fell short of what their ultimate goal was. Okay, and they said to leave it to the masses to debate that. Okay, but obviously it wasn't good enough. They acknowledged that, they owned that. He owned it multiple times. He owned it. Thank you, Neil. He owned it multiple times. Okay, and then pivoted to what's the checklist for the offseason. Well, he made it clear that obviously the checklist differs per year, obviously, and it's also based on the market and what presents itself and what had. And this is one reason I give the timelines the other day of the key dates, right? Because guys that are not free agents now could become free agents. That could alter their checklist, right, and so on. So we just don't know what the rest of the season is going to present itself, right? And the off season. So options being triggered or not being triggered, and so on. Like I said, there are guys like Andres Munoz who all of a sudden could become a free agent. Edwin Diaz who all of a sudden could become a free agent, right? So guys like this, that could change the trajectory and the calculus of the offseason. But he made it clear they haven't had their organizational and pro scouting meetings yet, so they don't have enough clarity right now as to who's available and what their attack plan is going to be. And obviously, he's not going to show his cards in a press conference. He never does. Okay. He wanted to communicate the message to the fans too that, yeah, it wasn't enough. They didn't get it done. Right. And he emphasized that we're just as pissed and just as frustrating and as hungry as the fans are. So he wanted to make that clear. Okay. This is what Brian Cashman was emphasizing. Okay. But again, they didn't identify, like I said, they didn't identify what the plan of attack is going to be yet. Like I said, not showing his cards. So very little information you're going to get specifically, but they gave information on specific players, existing players, right? Boone is not lying. What did he lie about, King Solomon? Did you watch the press conference? I know I did. I didn't see him lying about anything. What did he lie about? And did you watch it? And if not, whose Twitter are you listening to? Okay. Cashman also made some organizational decisions. Now, he's the guy that made these personal decisions with Mike Harkey and Trashman and what's the other guy? Chapman, right? So he's the guy that made these calls, not Aaron Boone. He made that clear too. So Thompson, yeah. And then he also said that anyone who can change they asked him, is anybody that can just come in and change October for a team? And he said, he didn't give any clarity on it because they don't know who's available yet, right? So, which is true. I don't know if there's one player that we can define that can just come in here and change everything. Like how often does a David Justice come by, right? So, and again, he emphasized too that they need to fire on all cylinders when it counts the most in October, and they did not do that. Toronto neutralized some of their strengths, right? And that's it. They neutralized some of their strengths, and they gave credit to Toronto. So, but he emphasized that they fell short. So, and again, he also emphasized that Toronto beat them in the regular season. They also beat them in the playoffs. They owned that, man. Brian Cashman owned that. So, I don't know what Harkey. Well, he wasn't fired. He made it clear that he wasn't fired. He's gonna offer him another opportunity. But I don't know what he had to do with 2009. What did Harkey have to do with 2009? And why Cashman has to be blamed for that? That doesn't make any sense. But like I said, and then he was asked about Cody Bellinger. Okay, and again, they asked him, "Are you making a priority to secure him this offseason?" Obviously, not going to lay his cards out, right? They haven't had their roster talks yet, but he did credit him for having a large impact to the team, just like he credited Trent Grisham for having a magical year for the team as well. So he said as much as they would like to have him back, but he didn't go any further than that. Okay. Then they asked him about base running. Okay, with the base running, do you feel like the team's gotten better base running and so on and so forth. See, with the addition of Caballero and some of these other folks, they did, but they said they need to clean up these areas where like they got thrown out second or third and so on and so forth. They do need to clean up those areas. They added, they added some good guys here. Okay, and he specifically pointed out Caballero. Okay, they're going to make calculated efforts to improve where they need to improve, obviously. So they're not going to openly say, yeah, we're after this guy. As much as fans would love that, it's not going to happen. Okay, very rarely does a team do that, and that's not only the Yankees. Very rarely does a team do that. Okay, so what else did he say? Oh yeah, and he said the market will generally dictate their ability to address needs to a high degree. And just like last year, did they expect Soto to leave? No, but he did. So they had to pivot accordingly, right? And he pointed out that they lost a key free agent last year, and they had to pivot accordingly. And and that pivot made them a different type of team. So, and then the questions went back to Volpe again, right? Does his injury impact? Did his injury impact in his play, and can he contribute in 2026? This is a question I was asking him about 10 times already, right? He said many believe the move, it did not affect him until later on in the season. Okay. Like I said, they checked in with everybody, doctors, trainers, MRIs, player. So, and they listened to everybody, including those things. And they said, they asked the player how he feels, and especially during a performance lapses, when he's slumping, and if he's getting positive saying he feels good, they're going to use part of that to go with how they maneuver forward. So that's part of their calculus. And he also said that he owned up to season. Oh yeah, the surgery moved up the priority scale on Anthony Volpe as the season progressed. Obviously, it wasn't talked about at all until the latter part of the season, but it started to be thought about, I guess. But it wasn't specifically recommended until the end of the season. So that's what he said. He does believe in Volpe at shortstop, but he said he will use the entire roster as needed. So nothing is guaranteed, and they will always look to improve at the position, especially shortstop, especially center field, even with other players. So again, he did not commit to Volpe as being the shortstop at all. He was less committal than Aaron Boone was. So, and then he was asked about Ryan McMahon. Is he the right guy for third base, or is he better suited for a platoon player? And he's always looking at right. He specifically looked at right-handed bats that could balance him out particularly against lefties where he struggles. Which makes me think of Omakami, right? The Japanese player I mentioned, who could play third base and first base. He would come at a much more affordable contract than Murakami, okay? And he also bats from the righty side. He's also known as a contact bat who runs into power, but he's a guy that works the count, has a high batting average, on-base percentage, and does things that a lot of Yankees don't currently do. So he could be an option here. It could be an option here. So they're looking to make smart, calculated decisions here. And then they asked about, well, Aaron Judge is going to be 34 in 2026. Do you see them, as basically the suggestion of, are we wasting his prime years? They said they're going to be, they're going to be aggressive in the roster build. Okay, are they going to be aggressive with the roster with that in mind? Okay, like I said, he's open to filling all the holes with the best players possible. So, but he has to base a lot of his decisions on what the market offers, what's available to him. Can't just manifest something out of nowhere, right? So then they asked about the Rodon surgery. How's it looking for? Does it impact his need to look for starting pitching? Again, he emphasized that they haven't had roster talks yet, but I'm gonna guess it's probably in the back of his mind. But he emphasized they don't know yet. Okay, it's going to be a late start to the season. They emphasized that. So how do they deploy their financial resources? They don't know what the resources are going to be yet. How much is available? How much Hal's going to authorize to be spent, and so on and so forth. But he did emphasize that the Hal said to run everything by him. If something comes, it's an opportunity, bring it to him. Hal did say that. as well. And Cashman made that clear too. Okay, but again, um, he also said some of these things are dormant in particularly in pitchers throughout multiple seasons, but nothing became apparent on Rodon's elbow until the end of the season. It wasn't even recommended until the end of the season, and they just cleaned up some loose particles in his elbow. So they said he'll be fine. And then they asked him about the collective bargaining agreement and does it impact long-term contracts moving forward. And he said he did emphasize this is a business, okay, as it's business as usual. And it says House says to bring anything that presents itself to him. But he said he's focused on 2026, not 2027. Okay, he's focusing on making the team better this year. They'll get to that as it comes because no guarantee is going to be a lockout either. There's a suggestion might happen, but there's no guarantee it's going to be a lockout. Okay, so then they ask him, are the big moves needed this offseason? And he emphasized that the job is always going to be to make the team better. Okay, they never know who's going to be on the market, who's off the market, and so on, and what's going to happen at a certain time. They just have to be ready for both. They never know which players are going to also stop, become cold, and what players are going to be hot. So they've got to be ready for both. So they have to have as diverse a roster as possible for guys to come in. Okay. So, and then they talked about his talks with Hal. He said Hal's as frustrated and as disappointed as the rest of them are, obviously, and he wants that title too. So, and nothing, and he also emphasizes that nothing is guaranteed. Nothing's a given. Okay. So, and if when it comes to the World Series, right, people are going to say what they're going to say, but he made it clear that their mission, their consistent guarantee every year is that they're going to compete for a World Series. They're going to try to fill, and that goes from Hal to Cashman to Boone. They're going to do whatever they need to do, whatever's possible to put the team in a position to win. Okay. And the last question that was asked was of Spencer Jones. Is he in the talks for the season? He says he's going to get a serious look, but again, he emphasized the winter will dictate whether he's on the roster, or not. So, based on this, I would not rule out Jones being traded or Dominguez being traded or Rice being traded. I would not rule out any of them because he made it clear that nothing is guaranteed for any one of those guys. Okay. So, why do we need Pete Alonso if he's a terrible defender first base, Teron? Why do we need Pete Alonso? What did they do to Jason? It's out of curiosity. What did they do to Dominguez? People suggesting that they mistreated Dominguez. How? Okay. Benched him for Grisham. That's not mistreatment of Dominguez. He did nothing to justify benching Grisham. Grisham had 34 home runs. He was one of the most clutch hitters on the team. He was a top prospect, and he still did not justify sitting Trent Grisham. So where's the argument there? He wasn't mistreated at all. He didn't play well enough to get a starting job. Yeah, I pointed out Alex Bregman is opting out, but he doesn't have a spot here. Alex Bregman. We'll see if they sign Tucker. Okay. We'll see if they sign Tucker. And again, there's a chance that 2 outfield spots could be available. Okay. But keep in mind, Jones is his bat is rated higher than Dominguez's. His glove is rated higher than Dominguez's. But he's also not hyped through the roof like Dominguez was. Okay. So we don't know what's going to happen. There's no guarantee. And again, you keep saying they didn't do anything to Jason. He didn't earn it. He has to earn the right to start, and he did not do that. So why are we accusing them of mistreating Dominguez? I mean, there are some folks that are suggesting they get Bellinger and Tucker. Okay. Volpe is a bad comparing. This is a terrible people. Why do keep people doing this? Why do people keep doing this? Did Volpe earn it? The fact of the matter is, there was nobody that they could replace Volpe with until Caballero came along. Okay, Dominguez was blocked by Bellinger, Grisham, and Judge. Okay, he did not play well enough to start in the outfield. So comparing him to Volpe is a pointless comparison. I understand what you're trying to do. I understand what you're feeling. Okay, I get it. They offered Jones and Lombard to Pittsburgh for Paul Skeens at the trade deadline, and Pittsburgh said no. What does Verdugo have doing anything? He's not here. Why are we bringing up Verdugo? He's not here. Hmm? If they get Bellinger and Tucker, Jones and Dominguez are gone. Hmm? King has an option that hasn't that has to be exercised. Okay. Who blocked Jason? They're on. Who blocked Jason? Verdugo? Jason couldn't stay healthy that year either. And he didn't play well enough to start either. So what are we talking about? What are we talking about? Jersey guy, I've talked about Brendan Donovan for years. 4 years. Right? So again, why are we really getting 2024? You give your top prospect in the slot if he earns it. He didn't earn it. If you're a top prospect and you don't earn the right to start, that's on the prospect. That's not on Verdugo. Okay? Any thought on Cashman saying about Hal not having the gene he tried to take back? He didn't say that. He didn't say that. I watched the whole thing. He didn't say that, Stephen B. Yeah, he had a solid season this year. It wasn't better than any of the outfielders. So who are you going to sit for him? Who are you going to sit for him? Flashes of star and also flashes of bust. He couldn't field the ball. He couldn't hit lefty pitchers from the righty side. Grisham is gone now, but that doesn't guarantee Dominguez is going to be here. Right? Yeah, Velasquez might get a shot. Yeah, Beck is in. What's up, Beck? Beck is in the house. What's up, baby? Well, that's the thing, too. Yeah. They wanted to play him over Verdugo. Dominguez could not catch fly balls. And Verdugo is an elite defender in the outfield, as is McMahon. You have to earn the top. You have to earn the right to let it ride. He didn't do that. I know you like Dominguez, and a lot of people do, but he has not earned the right to start over any of these guys yet. You got to do that. This is the majors, man. You have to earn it. That isn't what he said. He didn't compare Hal to George at all. He said George belonged in the Hall of Fame, and Hal is just as disappointed and frustrated as everybody else is. And he also said Hal said to bring any opportunity to him. So he wants the title too. He didn't say anything about Hal not having to see Gene and his dad. I watched the entire press conference. Right? You would rather lose with our top prospects than win with free agents. Okay, Deron. All right, well, that's on you. And you're entitled to that. If Dominguez stays, then he stays. If he goes, he goes. Right? No analytical guys were there. They weren't even mentioned. And like I said, you know what also was not mentioned? Injuries to all these guys. They didn't use injuries as excuses at any point in time. Cashman or Boone. Would I trade Jones for a year of Scooble? Yes. I would trade Dominguez for him too. '90s dynasty came up with top prospects taking over. Really? So could the '98 team have won without Wells and Brocious and El Duque? No. Could the '99 team won without Clements and these guys? No. Can 2000 without Justice? No. So the complementary pieces that Cashman added to the roster, the core four would not have won any of those World Series without those guys. Those guys are all trade acquisitions, right? Yeah, exactly, Consiglietti. Yeah, at the major league level, you have to outplay the other guys. You have to, absolutely have to. Mhm. Yeah, win exactly, man. Same and winning, man. They're gonna do whatever they can do to win. I understand, and they made it clear. They understand how frustrated fans are and how that things get amplified in New York by 1,000%. They emphasize that. Doesn't he? He's not even Trout. Yet people are saying he's the next Trout and Mantle. He's not either one. Let Jason Dominguez be Jason Dominguez, right? Yeah, I like him too, John. These expectations were put on Dominguez by other people, beat writers, and all these other folks, not the Yankees. I was surprised with the news on Rodon, but they jumped on it early. They got it done already, so I think he'll be fine, Johnson. He can develop into a solid hit, but that's okay. So can Spencer Jones. So can a lot of these other guys. Nothing's guaranteed. That's not enough to justify sitting Trent Grisham in a year that he had this year, or Bellinger after a year, or Judge. That doesn't justify. He can develop into a solid hitter, right? Right. Yeah, well, exactly, Beagle. I mean, this is why I call out beat writers when they put out narratives that are ridiculous. That are ridiculous. Well, that too, yeah. Coconuts. He does not have the same resources that George had. George had at his disposal. He doesn't. It's a different game now. It's a different business that he has to deal with. It's a good point. It's a great point. Beck, you're a legend, bro. Damn, bro. You're a legend. Don't bring back Bellinger initially. I mean, they're going to pursue him if Bellinger doesn't come back. That I know. And there are things that he does better than Bellinger, that and vice versa. So it is hard to find a rhythm third baseman. Again, like Brian McMahon stabilized the entire infield defense. His bat isn't sexy, but it doesn't need to be. That's why, yeah, I think I'm in favor of bringing in Rosario too. No doubt about it, man. And the guy that I mentioned from Japan the other day, he's a right-handed bat too. He's a strictly contact guy who runs into some power because of his contact abilities. So he's another guy who could, and he can also play the outfield. So he could be a fourth outfielder too. They said he's in the mix to get a shot at center field during spring training, but he did not guarantee that he would be here. So he opened up the possibility for Jones, Dominguez, and Rice to be traded this offseason. Cashman did that, not Boone. McMahon was a good pickup by Cashman. He was good. The Giants consider moving him? I don't know. I don't know. The Giants, I think, going to try to add to him. I think. Rodon? No, I wouldn't do that. No. Sports talk. Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you, bro. Thank you, man. But that was what was discussed in the press conference. You know, the questions revolve back to Volpe quite a bit, back to Judge quite a bit, right? No surprise. I wouldn't swap Rodon for Devers. I wouldn't do it. Well, pitching that comes up, yeah, I mean, there's possibilities, but the guy O'Connell from Japan, he was much better this year hitting higher velocity pitches. He's a good defender and he's a solid contact hitter. But his performance versus velocity fluctuated. Would I swap Rodon for Skeens? I mean, I would, but the Pirates will never do that. No. And Rodon does have a no trade clause, so Volpe spent. He's going to have to work his way back up in the minors. Yeah, he'll have to. You need to make sure that he's physically sound and fundamentally sound again too. But that's what happened, gang. That's what happened. Appreciate you joining me. I gotta hop on a conference call in a few minutes, but we're gonna elaborate on this. I'm gonna keep going live as more. So Cashman talks like this every year, Jake. Just keep this in mind. He talks like this every year. He never shows his cards ever. And then we think going to do. They thought he was going to do nothing at the deadline. He had the biggest deadline of anybody. So it just happens. It's in his free agent contract. Yeah, you get a no trade clause. A 10-5 is not no trade. 10-5 is the ability to veto a trade. So it's a little bit different with 10-5. Yep, he did talk Steinbrenner out of trading Jeter, Mariano. Yes, he did. But I'm going to hop on a conference call, gang. I'll see if I can go live again tonight if possible. If not, I'll be live tomorrow. But thank you for joining me, everybody. That's what happened to Presser. Nothing sexy, but a couple things to think about. And we will elaborate on this. Go Yankees. Peace.